Gentlemen, thank you for a great interview on how digital transformation is enabled by 5G, private 5G and edge computing, enabling highly advanced use cases with IoT, AI, and more. And once again, we heard about the importance of MEF's API and slicing standards. I know our audience appreciated having access to perspectives from Verizon, Ericsson, and MEF's executive leaders. All right, it's time for another piece of today's pie, the Analysts Corner. Up next, Karl Whitelock, VP Communications, SP Operations and Monetization at IDC, and Gabriel Brown, Principal Analyst at Heavy Reading, join us to provide some much-needed market insight on operations topics relative to 5G deployment. Let's listen in.
Hi, I'm Karl Whitelock, and I'm here with Gabriel Brown, and we want to talk a little bit more today about 5G operational readiness and the whole concept around slicing and some of the other aspects that are so important with 5G today. In fact, you think about it, everybody's talking about it. And the thing we've got to understand is that as I look at it, 5G has been in the hands of the technologists and the engineers for, 7, 8 years now, but yet in the hands of the operations teams for maybe just a little bit over a year, maybe a year and a half. There's a lot of issues out there. And I kind of liken the whole 5G world to a freight train that is pulled out of the station. It's gaining momentum. It's going around the mountain and it's picking up continued speed. We've done proof of concepts. We've gone through all sorts of trials, and we're starting into some of the early commercial deployments. And as the freight train winds its way around the mountain, it's coming up to perhaps maybe the second time around that mountain in gaining speed and climbing the ladder. And it's looking for all the aspects that need to happen. And I'm afraid that the train is coming around the corner expecting to go through a tunnel, and the tunnel is either only partially built or it's not built at all. And I would hate to see the consequences if that were to prove itself out. So what we want to talk about today is just a few of the operational concerns that I think are top of mind when you stop to think about how we move from proof of concept to general business reality. So Gabe, let's start with you. How would you assess the 5G services and monetization to date?
Hey, Karl. Yeah, so good to be with you today. I think I like your point about the industry's going to have to keep building. There's no way you can finish before you start deploying. It's about 2 years, I think, since the first markets launched in the US and South Korea on 5G, and then we've had many operators since then. I think it's over 140, 150 are now live. What it's done to date is basically introduce a lot of capacity into mobile networks. So that's enabled operators to move more people onto like unlimited plans, put that together with higher end user data rates, and it's moving people up the ARPU stack a little bit, and that's working quite well. We're also starting to see, but it is early days, some of the new service experiences in both consumer and enterprise starting to come through. Lots, I think there's lots in each category. Ultimately, for operators, what we hope to see and what the industry hopes to see is 5G and network slicing, as we've been talking about today, can help them move more to a sort of a value-based pricing model, away from cost plus to value-based pricing model. I think that's particularly relevant in the enterprise, and that's an area where network slicing can, in principle, help, so long as all the pieces, as you talked about, are in place. Now, I guess what a question I had for you is what kind of readiness or activity do you see in the industry in terms of them being able to kind of monetize and charge and bill for these either new services or put new business models in place?
Yeah, that's a very complex question. I often have discussions with different folks, and I ask, if you're going to deploy 5G, everyone says yes. Then I asked, well, you can't use your existing billing system. A new billing system has to be in order because the protocols have all changed. And yes, you can have a convergent charging system that now incorporates what the old was along with the new, and I'm talking 4G and 5G together. Real time is definitely the issue here because it's not just going to be a bits and bytes of consumption. It's going to be truly delivering of outcomes eventually as the enterprise aspect of all of this kind of kicks in together. So the other thing that's starting to happen is because of the nature of the way the 5G infrastructure is designed, we're moving to where I'd like to say partners can add value. So it's not just a connectivity option only. It's connectivity, it's plus content, it's, other business focus, data storage, understanding of what the business is really all about in delivering that kind of like end-to-end sort of a solution. So business relationships behind the scenes start to become extremely complex. So if you're not able to do a B2B sort of billing and tracking and keeping everything sorted out, you're not going to be able to handle these more complex business scenarios that are actually great opportunities for everyone involved. And think about also that charging changes the whole world in terms of moving from simple usage to, other delivery parameters. We've often said it's the bits that go across or it's the messages that get sent. Well, now we're talking about billing on other factors like the latency that might be associated with a given service or service slice. That has a very different look and feel to it, in addition to perhaps the volume of information. Maybe it's also based on input and output that's associated with a device that's close to the edge of the network, as the whole concept of multi-access edge computing becomes a bigger and bigger factor in everything that we do. So the complexities are increasing dramatically and exponentially, needless to say. So a convergent charging is absolutely the right approach to all of this. And where are we as an industry? I mean, we're still in the early stages. That's what I'm a little concerned with. We're not advancing in getting this absolute essential operational parameter well under control. But let me switch gears a little bit and talk a little more about slicing as a whole. Gabe, what is the real role of network slicing and what progress to date have you seen when it comes to network slicing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd agree with you on quite a few of those points. We are still in early phases. I mean, network slicing it's in the standards. We've been through a period of some proofs of concepts and things like that. Moving now into a kind of a field trial phase, I think it is a good thing to think about for this year. When it goes commercial, it's kind of hard to call at the moment, to be honest with you. I think maybe I'm being a bit optimistic, but I think 2022, this rolls out commercially and then scales thereafter. But your point on operational complexity is really bang on, I think. I mean, network slicing is a way to provide an application with the performance it needs, the routing it needs, for example, to a particular cloud provider or where your application sits, and in some cases, the privacy and security. The key characteristic, though, is it runs end to end. So you could think of that as across the network infrastructure. But actually, ultimately, this should probably go from CPU core on the end device to CPU core on the cloud server to really assure the service. Now, that's a big challenge. It's lots of different domains, different pieces of the network, the device, the application all need to somehow work together. And that's where this operational complexity is a big challenge. I think, the other thing is not all of these services are going to be mass market scale. So telcos and mobile operators today, they like to work on mass market scale, like everyone has a smartphone or, that type of thing. Now, in some of these scenarios, if you're saying you're doing a slice for a utility company or a transport company or whatever healthcare, they're going to be decent businesses that you want to serve, but they're not, everybody in the nation who's a target customer. So you need some way to support these valuable but not fully mass market scale type services. In a context of a lot of complexity, the only way to really do this is to somehow automate the service lifecycle process. That automation is going to be absolutely critical to having basically a low cost of production. All that machinery has to work sweetly, and that's how you're going to get, this kind of the mix we really want, which is great service but at an acceptable cost for the application. And that's where I guess a question for you: these operational challenges around slicing and orchestration. How do you think the industry's doing there right now?
That's another great question. I think we've got some good points and some challenging points there. I liken network slicing to kind of a living, breathing organism. It's dynamic. It's changing because there's so many parameters involved. I think another way to also look at slicing is that it's a virtualized piece of a physical network. So, I literally am now having to manage however many slices there are. That's the equivalent of how many networks that I have to simultaneously be keeping track of, and people using those network characteristics. So that means I've got to have some very dynamic aspects tied to this around inventory, provisioning, the catalog functions on one side of the coin, and also on policy, and of course the charging, like we talked about, on the more BSS side of things. And then mixed between both of those is the assurance aspect. We have to have slices that are going to meet operational agreements, SLA type management. And I think in some ways, we understand how to do this with a single network. And now we're trying to understand how to take those learnings and expand to this multi-network concept that we call slicing. And I think you can look at this and say, okay, we know what we've got to do, and we're doing it fairly okay if the number of slices is minimal. We can even do some things in the traditional swivel chair automation kind of idea, with humans in the loop. But as soon as the volume of those slices increases and becomes, operationally significant to any operator or to, the industry at large, there's now so many transactions, is what I'm saying, operating at scale. There's so many transactions that are happening, tweaks that have to be made. We're now moving away from the realm of human capability, and automation is the only effective way in which we're going to successfully manage all of these bits and pieces in a manner that's going to deliver value the way that the value has been promised. So, if you think about tying back to configuration changes, there's a lot of orchestration aspects, not only within the network, but this end-to-end service configuration is a big issue. And that's also part of the slicing idea. So with all of those, maybe you can give us a few examples, Gabe, of where network slicing or some trials are actually going on. And I know we're not operationally together as an industry, and I'm not sure that even any one organization operator is effectively handling all of these issues that we just brought up. But nevertheless, we have to learn as we go. So can you explain a few examples of what you're seeing out there in the industry?
Yeah, I can. I think I also really like your point about having to manage multiple virtual networks, basically. I think the encouraging thing there is, I guess, there is a lot of experience and learning in cloud networking and SDN and things like this. So there is a body of capability and knowledge that can help. There's a little bit, there's some particular things about mobile, the RAN and devices and so forth. But there is a kind of a platform of knowledge in the industry, which is going to help a lot. In terms of examples, there's lots of sort of POC type activity in operators, often partnering with universities or vendors, things like that, research institutes and so on. A couple I wanted to pick out that have come to mind of recently. I think there was one. I picked this one because it's a MEF, Metro Ethernet Forum POC with AT&T. And a bunch of partners have run a proof of concept around matching 5G network slicing and SD-WAN. So I think it's for like point of sale and retail type hospitality units and things. And the nutshell of it is mapping in SD-WAN to 5G network slices. So using that as an alternative or an optional access path, things like that. Really interesting kind of concept. Obviously, to get that into a commercial state needs some work, but it looks, very interesting. And for someone like me who comes right out of mobile, mixing it with SD-WAN is a little bit of one I hadn't have given enough thought. What else? We've seen, we did an event just a few weeks ago. We had an operator from Japan, KDDI, and they're talking about a proof of concept they've ran there in Tokyo, where they have an open RAN network using what's called a RAN intelligent controller, a RIC, to control the radio configuration. So it's the radio slice. And they had a great demo. They put a camera on the front of two trains in Tokyo, running through quite a deep, canyon, urban canyon type of thing, very harsh radio conditions. And with this application running, they were able to really smooth out the performance, deliver a kind of a solid, in this case, they were getting a solid 30 megabits per second downlink versus an up and down on the non-sliced service. So something like that on a railway, you're going to want a very consistent service. So I thought that was a great demo, and it showed this over-the-air challenge, which is a big challenge because shared resource and so forth. What else? There's a bunch of things. There's another one I saw just announced again last month, or depends when this goes out, in April, I think, in Hong Kong. HKT had run a trial of roadside safety applications using network slicing. So this is kind of communication, CV2X type applications where vehicles are communicating with roadside units to pick up information about traffic conditions ahead and so forth. Now, again, it's not a commercial services, but it's a trial, and the output is, this does work. It looks like we can turn it into something. Now, that, I guess, is the big challenge now, is to have a technology that's getting there, but wrapping it all into a commercial service and putting all the operational wrap and commercial wrap on it is still to be done. And I guess with that, I'll just turn it back to you to close out.
Yeah, I think the way to remember everything here is that in the old days where it was only voice, we still had provisioning, we still had assurance, and we still had billing. Nothing changes in this more complex world. So the key takeaway I would have is operational readiness. It's not an end state. It's a continuous evolutionary path. And as the complexity increases on the back end, to make it more simple and more straightforward and more easy to do business on the front end, that's the way we wanted to address it. Automation plays a key role here because the complexity is now going beyond the ability of which humans can keep up with the change that needs to make on a real-time operational level. So, the characteristics of service slicing is changing not just the telecommunications industry, but changing all industries in all areas and walks of life. And we could continue to talk about other use cases like the ones that were the proof of concepts you were just describing. There's literally things are growing and changing on a very regular basis. But rather than trying to take any more time today to talk through some of those specifics, because they're fascinating to hear about. But again, my mind's always thinking, how are we going to bill for that? How are we going to provision those customers? How are we going to keep track of those promises from the SLA perspective? Always constantly in the back of my mind as to what to do next. But we are out of time today, so I thank you, Gabe, for your insights, and I hope our audience enjoys all the aspects of what we've been trying to bring to them today. It's a very important topic, and I'm sure we'll have more to say in the months ahead. Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks, Karl. Good to speak to you.